All right. How you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
I am well. Thanks for agreeing to do this with me.
Yeah,
I greatly appreciate it.
of course.
So,
Thanks for having me
uh,
on, man.
all right, not a problem. So, as you can see, this is not maybe not you, but people who have seen me before. This is not my usual digs, so I am on call today. I'm in the hospital, so I have a moment in between cases where I can do this while I'm waiting for another surgeon to finish up. So I thought it'd be a great time to chat with you and find out a little bit more about what's going on in your head and what's going on in your life and about what it is that you do day to day. So first of all, Denzel, young man, tell me, for the people who don't know who you are, give us a briefs, bit about who you are. Who is Denzel Allen, and what do you do for day-to-day living?
My name, yeah, Denzel Allen. Originally from Connecticut, and so that's East Coast. And then now I'm living in California. Very much feel like, I was meant to be in California, so I feel very comfortable out here with the sunshine every day. What I do day to day, I'm basically a movement specialist for people who want to feel better, move better, look better, get stronger, all those kind of things. So, you know,
All right, excellent, excellent. So I have a list of questions that I prepared for you, and I am excited to chat with you, and I want to dive right into it, okay?
uh,
So in my preparation to speak to you, I was already following you on Instagram, but I wanted to do a little bit more. So I kind of looked at your website, I looked at your blog, and I kind of went through some of them. So you have a blog post there that is called Save Yourself from Injury. So first of all, I want to know, what is the core message of that blog post, and why did you put it up?
the core message is pretty much that in the title of don't lose sight of what you're working out or training for. And for most people, that's health, right? So you don't want to go to the gym and have this mindset of basically destroy yourself and then end up injuring yourself when you really were going there to make yourself feel better and move better, right? So the reason I put that message out there is because we're in a moment where, high intensity, everything has kind of taken over, whether it's high intensity interval training or it's high intensity yoga or it's high intensity, like things that you wouldn't expect to be able to be high intensity. People will find a way to turn it into that. And it's just trying to get people to take a step back, remember their why. Like, why are you training? Is it just to do these extremes, or is it to actually feel good and to become a better person over time? And if it's the latter, then, have some patience. Make sure that that's the top of your mind every time you go into a training session, and just, don't let your ego get in your way.
For sure, because you know I mentioned a little bit off screen there before about the bigger, faster, stronger, and everybody believes that they're going to the NFL or they're going to the NHL, they're going to become pro this or that, and it's all about the bigger, faster, stronger. And people have to kind of have a frank discussion with their ego sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And think about what it is that they are actually attaining. If you just if you could give some people some just quick little, like, three suggestions about, saving themselves from injury when they work out. What are three most important things, or three very important things that you would tell people to change about the way that they work out?
So I would say the notion of like doing as many reps as possible without having any rules around that. So I don't think it's so bad to necessarily have sets that are pushing yourself, but making sure that your form is still top of mind. So making sure that your form doesn't start to break down just to squeak out another rep, right? Like that's pretty much telling your body to perform badly, right? It's like, no, we want our bodies to do reps perfectly. That way, when we get into whether it's a sport or whether it's life, it's okay, if I have to pick this thing up quickly, I want my body to only know good movement and not bad movement, right? So yes, I would definitely say don't push yourself to the point where your form changes. So try to keep form, technique top of mind, be present in like what you're doing. So don't go to set up for, let's say, bench press or back squat and be thinking about breakfast or lunch or something like that. So really staying in the moment.
Yep.
And then just remembering your why, right? Like, are you going to go for that max today just because the gym's packed and everybody's watching you on the platform and you're like, ooh, I want to show out? Or, like, or are you going to remember, oh, I'm not sure if I can do this. It's going to take everything out of me because my ego is not going to let me fail. But now I have to take 2 weeks off because I threw something out, right? So it's really trying to make sure that just check that ego.
All right. So, here's something that has to do with ego to some extent. So, you have had a career at UConn as a varsity football player. Okay. And the first thing that I want to know about that is, how would you say that your career as a competitive football player at a high level has prepared you for a career as a strength and conditioning coach and a movement specialist?
So I would say, one, it's a huge privilege, right, to be able to be introduced to that high level of a sport and to be able to see all that goes into it, from the training staff to the athletic trainers, seeing, how do we keep people out on the field? How do we try to keep people as healthy as possible, performing at their highest level? So I think a huge takeaway from that I brought into what I do now is knowing that, okay, if a person comes in and let's say they have something going on with their knee or their ankle or their shoulder, it's like you shouldn't just lay at home and, sit on the couch all day. There's still things you can do. And it's how do we be able to work around those injuries or hurts or whatever you want to call them, to be able to still keep you pushing towards your goal, but doing it in a smart way where you're not just constantly kind of bothering whatever you have going on. So being able to see that at a university was really important. And then also being able to see all these different types of coaches and people that you're interacting with, it helps you as a coach be able to kind of create what kind of coach you want to be, right? Like you have so many different models. Like, okay, I saw that person, I didn't really like how they were talking to so-and-so, or, oh, I really vibed with how that person was communicating or how they were able to get people to do something. So I would definitely say that just overall exposure of different coaches and different aspects was definitely impactful on just my overall coaching mindset.
What about having played a varsity sport, and I can see some people here that I know play varsity sports. Mm-hmm. So when you were coached by them, what do you think from a mental perspective, right? From a psychological perspective, how do you think that experience prepared you? In particular, talking about the mental and the psychological component, how do you think that's prepared you?
Well, that was a culture of they needed everybody to be a certain level of strong, right? So basically, they didn't really care how you felt day to day, so you just had to get used to grinding, like pushing. So I've had to work at those extremes, the places that a lot of people sometimes want to go to because they see all these athletes doing, these very hard, challenging workouts. But if you ask a lot of them, how do they feel? Their answer is going to be not great. So I remember, pushing through everything every day. I didn't feel great, but I have to do this for my back squat. All right, that's what I'm gonna go do. I have to do this on bench press. All right, that's what I have to go do. So it gave me the mindset of at least going in and having to get the work done. And I would say now I just understand that the work can change day to day.
For sure. For sure. I remember from my own experience, I remember a classic line our head coach used to say when guys would get hurt during practice. He would say, "Are you hurt
Yeah.
or are you injured? Because if
Yeah.
you're injured, we're going to move the drill around you so we can keep on while the trainers attend to your injury. But if you're hurt, suck it up, buttercup."
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man. And you know what? In hindsight, when I look back at my career as a football player, I love football. Football is my passion growing up. But there's so many things that I can laugh at now that I just think, like, what were we thinking? It's insanity, man. But it is what it is.
But that's it. That's the culture, and it's just having to remember that that's the culture for that sport because of these very specific reasons, right? Like they do have time constraints. They do know, okay, we need to try to squeeze this much out of everybody week to week, day to day. So you're obviously going to do things a little different than when the timeline seems to be unlimited.
Exactly.
But, you know.
All right. So tell me then specifically, how has your philosophy of weight and strength training changed from when you were a football athlete to when you became a strength training coach and movement specialist now? And you've touched a little bit upon this, but let's go a little bit more into depth. So tell me how that has changed.
So it's definitely changed from the no pain, no gain. That was like the premise. It was to push yourself to the absolute limits day in, day out, no matter how you felt, right? So that has definitely basically gone to the kind of the opposite spectrum of it, where you should be putting in the work, but you should be paying attention to how your body does feel day to day and adjusting. So if you have a program, right, and something says, let's say something simple like 5 sets of 5 at like 220 or 225, but you start your first set, your warm-up set, and you're like, ooh, I don't know about today, right? Like old me would be like, okay, I have to do all of that work no matter what. And then more than likely I wouldn't feel that good after that session. But now I understand, okay, what is the overall goal of this? It's to, over time, progress, is to make sure that I can stay consistent, is to do this and that. So if it says 5 by 5 now, 225, I feel free to just completely rewrite that. Okay, maybe 2 reps feels good at that weight, or maybe that weight just doesn't feel good at all today, so I'll do something a little less. So really just trying to pay attention to how the client is feeling day to day, whether it's like I'm working with somebody else, how are you feeling? Because if you came in and, like, let's say you today, right, you're up how early, had to drive, did this and that, and then you get to me and you're like, whew, I had such a morning. And it's like, well, we have a lot of work to get done today. And like, I don't know about that. And like, if I just keep pushing you through that and every time I just ignore what you're saying and how you're feeling, this and that, eventually something's going to have to give. So I'd rather not find out what has to give and just be like, okay, each day we're able to get some work in. Our whole goal is to feel better, move better, get stronger over time. That takes patience. That takes listening to your body, right? And that takes always ebbing and flowing what you're doing based off of how you feel, and also just off of that's how life goes. It undulates. So,
For sure.
Yeah.
And you most definitely, people have to listen to their bodies and really be cognizant of what is the message that your body is telling you, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know if you follow mixed martial arts at all, but Faraz Sahabi is a coach from TriStar Gym. So TriStar is the gym in Montreal that trained George St. Pierre. Mm-hmm. And he was on Joe Rogan's podcast and they were talking about training. And one of the things that he said that I found very, very interesting, because all my life up until being sort of a gym owner and movement person, was all about the bigger, faster, stronger, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Firas Sahabi said he doesn't believe in ever training somebody till they were sore. And Joe Rogan is like, get the hell out of here. What are you talking about, man? And he's saying, look, if you look at studies of people who train to soreness and people who train submaximally, the amount of work that the people who train submaximally can do is way more than the people who train to maximum, to their max effort and to soreness. Because as you said, those people, they're redlining all the time, but just like a drag racer, they rebuild the engine after every race, right? So you have to take time to allow the body to heal itself from all the micro trauma that you've done by redlining it, right? Whereas if you train and you just, today I feel like I can do this, and you do it, you're not training to your max, you always have something left in the tank. The number of consecutive days that you can train is way more. And over time, it's like the hare, the tortoise and the hare, right? The hare super fast gets there, up, breaks down. It's got to sit on the edge of the road, fix himself, while the tortoise, who's taking these little steps, little one after another, but he just keeps taking them. Compound interest, man. It over time, it adds up. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, exactly. That hits it right on the head. Because that's the whole goal, right? Like you can have way more volume in a week if you break your sets down with that, using that same philosophy, right? Like if you have to do, let's say 20 reps of something in a day, if you do all of them at once, that's going to burn you out. But if you split it up into chunks that are way more digestible, then you can continue to do that work over time, which is going to give you more and more volume. And if you do that day in and day out, it's like, okay, if you look at my week of what I did, and not once did I ever feel broken down. So the next day I was able to just go right back into it, get some more in. And then the next day I can go get some more in. And I'm never having to worry about, okay, well, I destroyed this part. How am I gonna go about, regenerating this? And then, okay, I destroyed this thing over here, and now I have to spend all this time doing this and that. It's like, no, like, let's just be way more balanced with everything that we do.
For sure. And I see another coach on here, the Inji coach, and I'm sure he'll agree. It again comes back to the ego, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what? I want to be in a gym and I want to be yoked and I want to lift as much and I want to be on the platform and have everybody look and see all this stuff. Like, I'm not going to lie. I like that, right?
Yeah.
But I have to recognize that what is the point of that? You know what I mean? At this point in my life, I'm 50 years old. I want to be strong. I want to be able to be active whenever I want. I want to be able to do whatever it is that I want to do, but I am not training for the NFL anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not training for the CFL. I'm not training for any professional sport. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, I'm training to be an all-around generalist and just be fit, functional, and healthy, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So, how about, so you, in another blog post, you talk about movement and strength are being keys to a healthy life. Okay. So first of all, I want to know, I want you to explain what you mean by that. And then why do you promote this viewpoint? And yeah, so why do you think that? Why do you promote that viewpoint?
So, I mean, to do any general thing throughout your day, it's going to take movement and it's going to take strength. If you lose the ability to do either of those, right? Like if you lose the strength to stand up out of a chair, right, you're going to become pretty immobile very quick and your body's going to start to essentially deteriorate. And the same thing with movement. So it's like, if you're not moving, if you're losing strength, eventually that's going to lead to just being sedentary. And, all the research that's there on how being sedentary is just going to quickly to be morbid, put you into the earth much sooner than it needs to happen, right? So my reason for kind of pushing that message is I feel like there's a focus on shortcuts on, okay, how can I move pretty much as little as possible? And it's like, no, we should be trying to figure out how can we gain more movement in, you know, and not making movement seem like it has to be 10 sets of 10 of something. It's just movement. You don't get up, dance, or, you know, go just do a push-up or stand up and sit down out of your chair. Just any way you can figure out how to sneak in some movement. And then strength, obviously, again, if you can't get up off the floor, if you can't get up out of a chair, all of those things will just, again, just kind of put you into the earth much sooner than needs to be. So I'm just trying to get everybody to be able to, while they're here, enjoy life. And then the way to enjoy life is to be able to move and express movement through your body. So, yeah.
Perfect. Two things that I want to touch on there. So I agree with everything that you said wholeheartedly. And the first thing that I want to say is that, you know, we see a lot of people that come into our facility, and we talk to them about being strong and about, you know, how everybody should be able to lift weight and be able to move things, push, pull, because this is how you function in life. And we have a lot of people who are, they're specialists, like they're long distance runners. No, man, I'm healthy. I just run. And I'm like, no, you do this one thing and you are healthy, but you're not really healthy, right? And so I think it's important that we promote this message of strength training, because I think that is one aspect. And for you to be a well-rounded person and to truly be healthy, you can't just have great cardiovascular function, or you can't just be flexible. You need to have good cardio, you need to be flexible, you need to be strong, you need to be mobile, you need to have good coordination, all of these things. So that's the first point. And the second point, which I think is an interesting perspective, I talked to Matt Wenning a while ago, and you know, this guy has been the strongest man in the world, competitor for many years. And one of the things that he said to me, you know, we were talking about him training special forces soldiers, and he was talking about people do not see that strength is integral with cardiovascular fitness. And I was saying, well, explain that. What do you mean by that? He said, well, look at it. If I increase your strength, your ability to move this object is you are going to exert less effort to do that, right? And if you are going to exert less effort, you're going to be able to do it for longer, right? As opposed to the guy who's got lungs like a freaking horse, but he's super weak, and he's going to be straining from rep 1, right? And so strength, people look, they go, oh, I don't want to become a bodybuilder. Man, first of all, in order for you to do that, you don't know how much work these people put in to look that way. But second of all, it's just, that's not it, man. You just need to be able to move yourself and move weight and do it comfortably without hurting yourself.
And I think that's it. I mean, if people are looking for the shortcut, right? Like that, to me, that's it. It's work to be able to make other work feel like it's nothing. So I'm like, I could do 100 reps with something really light, or I could do 10 reps with something really heavy. I'd rather do the really heavy thing. That way I know the lighter thing's going to feel really easy once I get to that point. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much how I treat my cardio. If I'm going to do cardio, it's going to be pretty much like long endurance, low intensity. And then I'm going to have my power training, which is what you see me doing with kettlebells all the time, right? Very short spurts. I guess would be technically high intensity, but with very long recovery in between.
Well, and the thing is, like, you know, when you look at modern society, ain't none of us chasing down gazelles, none of that kind of business. So if we have to do work, it's going to be that. Like, I need to do maximal or submaximal effort, and I have to do it for a short period of time, and it's probably going to have strength or explosivity related, and then I'm going to get to rest. And then I'm going to have to go again and get to rest, right? It will be interval type of training. It's not going to be anything that's super long sustained at a high level of output.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So in another post, you talk about the negative mindset. Okay. So first of all, tell us what is it that you're referring to here, and then how do you avoid that?
Yeah, so what I'm referring to in that statement is basically the notion of like can't, or like self-doubt, or just pointing out things that are bad, right? Like we can always do that. I definitely fall victim to doing that, probably way more frequent than necessary. But so yeah, so it's just like saying things like, "Oh, I can't do that," or "No way, that weight's too heavy," or whatever it may be. It's like, okay, we can say the exact opposite, right? Like we don't really know what is true. So it's like if we say the exact opposite, like they say, if you're optimistic and wrong, that's better than being pessimistic and right. So it's just having this belief that, okay, things are better, can be better, not focusing on, okay, I'm not happy with how this part of me looks, and being like, you know what can I do? I can go into the gym and put in work today, and just starting to try to just get away from any of those things that is going to trigger you into having a negative mindset, or put you into a little bit of that negative state. Just trying to find ways to essentially reframe it, or just completely put it into a box and then talk about anything else but it.
So, one of the things that I think that's quite interesting about life is, if you listen to theoretical physicists, right, and cosmologists, they talk about the fact that there's no way for us to know whether we are in the real world, or whether we are part of a simulation, right? Because if there was a civilization that was sufficiently advanced enough to create a lifelike simulation, there would be no way for us to know that, right? And they said given the number of the number of planets and potential solar systems, that there is a good chance that we could be living in a simulation. If you think from that perspective, I think, well, why can't we just program the computer, right? And it's like, instead of thinking bad things, I'm going to think good things, and pre-program myself to do that, right? And so I'm constantly trying to tell myself, I'm programming the computer. I'm programming the computer. And even if something negative happens, then I say, okay, well, I'm programming the computer. And given the fact that the weight, for some reason, we have this negative bias in our brains, right? And if you say a positive thing, you could say 10 positive things and say one negative thing, and that one negative thing has way more force,
more weight,
more weight than the positive. So, like, tell us practically, man. Like, and I know that you thought these things, because being a varsity football player, and you have the practice roster and you have the dress roster, and you got to go down and check the list. Am I on the dress roster, right? So if you aren't on the dress roster, like, how is it? Give us practical. How do you do this? How do you keep this positive mindset?
Yeah, I mean, so the positive mindset is just it's trying to stay in the what can you control, right? You can't control what they're, do they choose you or not, but you can control them out, the quality of the work that you're doing. So it's just really trying to focus on that, not on all these other things that, like, you have to depend on this person to do that. You have to depend on this person over here to do that. It's okay. Let me focus on what can I do? How can I help? And if I'm in this situation where, okay, I wanted to make the travel squad, but I'm on practice squad still, how can I still make this team better, right? Like, I can go ahead and I can try to bust this guy's ass across the line for me, make him get better, So it's like, what can I do to still have an impact on this team, and also make sure that I'm still growing and developing into the person that I want to be, right? Just because they say that you're not, their words would be, you're just not good enough, son, or whatever, whatever that might look like at the time is, okay, do you want to believe what they're saying? Or do you want to be like, you know what? Nah, I'm gonna prove you wrong because I believe in myself, the power of positive thoughts eventually gonna, work its way out the best that it can. So if it turns out down the road, maybe I didn't do enough or it just didn't crumble that way, I will still feel good that I put in as much work as possible that I could to try to get to that point. So it's just really focusing on what you can control and just keeping it there.
For sure. And the other thing that makes me think about is really instead of focusing on the result, right? This is about, and we'll come back to this a little bit later in our discussion, but this is about focusing on the experience and the journey, and the end result is not the goal.
Yeah.
It's the experience that you have on your journey to get to that goal, right? Yeah. And so, you really have to sort of refocus what it is that you're striving for and what is important during that process.
Yeah. So I was a walk-on. So that was, going from thinking, you're going to get a scholarship when you're in high school because you're the best, one of the best players on your team and this and that. And then you get no offers. You're like, cool. All right. Well, I want to play football still. So, what do I have to do now? So it's like, okay, well, I got to walk on. How do I walk on? I got to, get myself in shape and be ready to work, be ready to try to just put in work every day. And then, hopefully, obviously I had my goals in line. Like you're saying, I want to make the travel squad. I don't want to be here, practice squad and this and that. But it's just constantly being like, I know what the process is. I see the work that others are putting in. Am I putting in that amount of work? Have to have that honest conversation with myself. If I'm trying to get to there, I need to know where here is at the moment and see what I can change in that moment to try to make sure that, okay, one day I will have put in enough work. I will have gotten myself to this place. And also confidence goes a long way. So if you're constantly self-doubting, being like, they don't think I'm good enough, then, that's going to show. That's going to show in your body language. That's going to show in your play. So it's just trying to remember that, like, you're like, no, I am good enough to be here. Like, yeah, no, I'm better than that guy. Like, let me show them, So it's like that, in that stance, that's where ego is, I think, a good thing, where it's like, okay, believe in yourself, don't let yourself get into like this self-protective mode where you just shut down because of criticism. It's like, okay, have an open mind, a listening ear, and see, okay, how can I improve? If this person's saying that, I'm hesitating on this and that, and I see it in the film, okay, how do I work on getting better at doing that? And then just doing that and then just trying to go forward. But it's definitely hard, but definitely worth it if you just stick to just the process.
For sure, man. So so let's segue from that to something that is also, a psychological issue. Why is mindfulness an important part of strength training? Because normally when people think about mindfulness, they're talking about yoga, right? They're talking about just Zen, right? Strength training is not typically that kind of thing. So why is it an important part, or why do you feel it's an important part of strength training?
I think it's an important part, kind of like how we started this conversation of just saving yourself from injury. So if you can be mindful and you have your stop signs in place of, okay, how did that rep feel? How did that rep feel compared to the rep before? Like if you're trying to purposely move a weight, then you should know the cadence you're trying to move it at, right? And are you trying to keep that cadence for every rep, or are you trying to play with the cadence? But like you should have, in my opinion, there should be thought behind every rep that you do. Okay, I'm trying to move all 5 of these reps at the same exact cadence the whole time. want them to feel pretty much the same. I want to make sure that I'm paying attention to how I'm setting up, how I'm putting, if it's a barbell, how I'm setting it up, how I'm putting it down. Uh, just all of those little things, paying attention to those little details are going to give you way more back, because it's okay. It's just another moment in time where you are being present in the now, right? And that's the whole point of meditation or mindfulness, is just being very aware of current situation. So with strength training, if your goal is to get as strong as possible, but you go into it and just like, check the box, and I ask you, okay, how was like your 80th rep of something? And you're like, I don't know. You don't know at what point were you starting to head downhill. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know at what point you were peaking. So it's to me, it's very important, if you're trying to build strength, to know, okay, at what point where I was putting in work, did I feel at my strongest? At what point was I putting in work and it was starting to go downhill? So if you're not taking the time to do that, then it's kind of like every day you're just rolling the dice and hoping at some point you'll feel good, you'll feel strong, instead of like being in the moment and knowing when that is. So.
Okay. So you have a blog post where you talk about 3 pillars of education.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So first of all, so talk to me about 3 pillars of education. What are they? Why do you think they are important?
So for physical education, you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So pedagogical, restorative, and martial. So we'll start with martial. So martial, like martial arts. So anything you can think of that falls under that umbrella, whether it's kung fu, whether it's jujitsu, whether it's kali, Muay Thai. And then you're going to have restorative. So those are things to basically make you feel good, right? To try to restore your body back to the basics. So whether that's yoga, Indian clubs, I mean, you can throw anything that's just relaxing into that bucket. And then, so, foam rolling, I guess, and stuff like that would be put into there. And then pedagogical is going to be, basically, that just means learning. So under that umbrella would be what we do, so strength training, but you'll have play under that umbrella as well, dance, and just overall movement. So basically those 3 pillars are, in my belief, and I learned this from Dr. Ed Thomas, and he, just talks about like being in balance. So each of those is going to give lessons to the others, that you can basically have like a circle that's enclosed by having all of those. And if one of those missing, then you basically have a leak in your training, in a place where you're losing things that could just be good for making you a better person or getting you closer to your goals.
Okay. So let's switch gears here, and you have a blog post where you talk about anatomic shaped footwear, and you show off your collection of Vivo Barefoot shoes, right? And you're a proponent, obviously, of going barefoot. Okay. And so first question is, why is this?
Why do I feel like they're important to wear
barefoot? Why do you think it's
So I think the easiest way to think about it is to put on the biggest pair of winter gloves that you can think of, and then try to write your name on a piece of paper. You're making that task way harder than necessary just by having this giant poofy thing, that's getting rid of all these sensors that you have, and your feet are pretty much going to be the same thing as your hand. So there's a bunch of information that just by going barefoot, your body is going to move better, right? Like you can watch people not knowing where their balance is when they have these shoes with such a heel lift. They're like, okay, perform a squat, and they're going onto their toes, or they're pushing their butt way back. They have no idea where their balance is. And just doing something as simple as, okay, let's just kick your shoes off. Your body has a way of grounding itself and just being able to find its balance a lot better. And then also, you know, how the foot functions is going to affect how the ankle functions, the knee, the hip, your low back, your shoulders. It's going to go all the way up the chain. So just by addressing what's going on at the feet, it's not like there needs to be a lot of hours spent on it, but just as simple as going barefoot and allowing your feet to do what they're supposed to will go a long way with just overall health of how your body feels and functions.
Okay, so if we go from just general function now, and if we talk about athletes in specific, tell me how, if at all, do you think that barefoot training translates to athletic performance?
Yeah, so I think it is just an example of having that balance. So if you're always kind of in these tight things that are bounding your feet, being able to just give your foot a chance to relax is very important because, you know, with athletes, a lot of times their performance will go down just from having a toe that's a little aggravated, you know, something as simple as that. And it's as easy as, okay, maybe we just need to massage the feet out after a training session, or maybe it's, you know, get your feet to be less sensitive. Like if you're walking around in a field, you should be able to do that barefoot without that creating pain. And if that is creating pain, then, you know, how else is that affecting your body? So for athletic performance, I think it's a way of just being able to keep people out on the field more if they just address, okay, let me make sure that I'm taking care of my feet because this is where my performance starts. So if these get jacked up, you know, everything else is just going to go downhill.
For sure, for sure. And, you know, it's interesting. Um, you talk about all the sensory input that you can get from your feet, right? So I don't know if you're familiar with the homunculus of the brain. And you know, for those who are listening, the homunculus is basically a diagram that shows you all of the parts of the body that are innervated by the brain or that receive signals from the brain. And the homunculus, the shape of the body, the sizes of those individual parts reflect the amount of information that comes from those parts. And if you look at the homunculus, the parts that are big are the hands, the tongue, the penis or the groin area, right? And the feet, right? You look at those and they're huge, right? And that's because and also your eyes, your face. So you get a ton of input from all of those areas. And it's funny how I joke with my patients and our clients. We basically put our feet into foot jail, solitary confinement. That's what we do from day one. And then we expect people to be able to function with that, right? So here's a question that pertains to your past as a football player. So, you know, we talked about barefoot training, athletic performance, shoes, and all of that. So there's a bit of not only there's a bit of culture that's associated with athletic footwear, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you, if we think, you know, and I agree with you, I think that barefoot training is something that helps athletic performance, and we should do it whenever we can. How do you reconcile that with the shoe swagger, right? Like everybody's got to have their shoes looking crisp. When you go out on the football field, you go out on the basketball field, even if you're just training, man, you got to have your shoes that look, you know, they look bang on, man. So how do you reconcile this shoe culture with what we just said, what you were just saying about athletic performance, barefoot training?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely tough. It's definitely a part of, you know, look good, you play good, you feel good, you know. So like, I think it's a huge obstacle to get over, because the reality is a lot of these barefoot shoes aren't the most fashionable things in the world, right? So, uh, I mean, it's just trying to get people to not ditch and get rid of any of those things that they do hold on to and like. It's just like what we're saying. It's okay if you have a moment to be able to kick them off, you know, put them away nicely, make sure you don't crease them. and and let's just get your feet into the earth or onto the whatever surface you're on just for a little bit, you know, and then you can throw them back in, but just start to try to pay a little bit more attention. And I think most of the time when people start to address their feet, they immediately realize, oh my gosh, wait, what? I can't get my foot to do this and that. I can't get my big toe to move independently from my other toes, you know? So it's like things like that where athletes, I think, get super competitive, where they're like, nah, but like I own my body. You know what I mean? Like I should be able to do this. So it's just like, okay, can I slowly be able to introduce some of this to them? And then usually, you know, they'll take it away and be like, okay, I
I got
understand.
stuff to work on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, in another blog post, you write about strength training being a movement practice. And this really caught my attention, okay? Because generally speaking, when people talk about those two aspects of fitness or wellness, they talk about them as separate, right? Completely separate from one another. So I am interested to hear, how is it that you see that strength training is actually a movement practice or a movement skill? Please explain that.
Yeah, so I mean, with any of the movements, we can take something like a goblet squat, right? There are objectives to how you're trying to perform that movement, right? You can go into it and you can just hold on to the bell and just squat up and down. Or if you want to get the most out of it, you're paying attention to, okay, how much tension am I putting into the handle? You know, how's my back posture? Am I trying to really engage, opening up my hips as I pull myself down towards the floor, trying to keep an erect posture in that position? So it's like you have all of these parts of the movement that you can be thinking about all the time, or you can choose not to. And I think you're going to get the most out of any rep if you are taking the time to think about, okay, why am I doing this movement? How am I supposed to perform this movement? You know, and then while you're doing it to do that. When it comes to like, you know, more athletic movements, you know, you want that to be way more free and expressive. But when it comes to strength training, why not be as mindful in that moment and to really try to think about what are all the benefits? Because the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. But if you just go into it and just check the box, then, you know, that's all you're going to really get out of it, is a box checked.
Okay. I like that. I like that. So let's talk about your 100 swings a week, right? Or not a week, but your 100 swings project. And I think you did it for like 26 weeks straight. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So I really like that idea. I really like that. But tell me, please, what was the impetus behind that? How did that come about?
So, I mean, basically how that came about was it was the first or second week of lockdown from you know COVID, and I'm like, I don't know how long we're gonna be in this, but at that point I was already missing seeing people and having like a community of people that were doing swings with, and I was having, you know, this understanding of all the workshops and stuff that I thought I was going to be doing this year were, you know, going out the window. So I'm like, how can we create like a sense of community still around kettlebells, like I've been used to, right? Like, so yeah, so then I was like, okay, well, let's just do 100 swings and do it in a way that a beginner, I think, could do it, and also a like pro could do, right? So if it's someone that's very used to doing kettlebells and they want to work on their conditioning in that time, or maybe they're trying to get stronger at their swings, they can do single arm swings or something like that, because we were just doing 10 every minute on the minute. So, you know, that would end up being about 15 to 20 seconds of work, and you'd have about 40 seconds of rest. So, you know, that's pretty, that's the kind of work to rest ratio I like. So yeah, so it was just as simple as wanting to get people together, knowing that a lot of people are doing a lot more sitting than we're used to. And swings are a movement that are pretty much as anti-sitting as possible. So,
All right.
so
So, yeah, when I saw that, I thought, oh, geez, man, this is such a great idea. And I every week, well, not every week, but quite a few weeks I watch, and I kind of had it going on in the background because I wanted to do it, and it
yeah,
just that time just did not work for me.
yeah,
Unfortunately, I was always either in the clinic or in the OR. But I thought that was a great project, and what I thought was interesting about that was how it grew over time,
hmm
right?
yeah,
So I thought that was very, very cool.
yeah,
So let me ask you another question here about yoga. Okay, so and I'm not sure if you do yoga, but when you talk about, well, actually, no, you did say you did do yoga, and you talk a lot about mindfulness of movement. So um, football and yoga generally don't compute. Um, and I want to know how it is that you got from football. Well, first of all, did you do yoga during football? And then number two, how you got from your football playing mind state to the mindfulness movement yoga mind state that you have now.
yeah. So, actually, oddly enough, or maybe not odd, but my freshman year when I was at University of Rhode Island, our strength coach, Coach Proctor, had us do yoga on Sundays. So that was like my first exposure, you know, and I was like, 18 and not about that at all.
Listen, I told you that I'm a team doc for Ottawa U football, and I know when those guys are doing movement, mobility stuff and yoga, they're like, man, like,
Yeah.
is it, hey, coach, is it over yet? Is it over yet? Oh, are you? Okay, hold on a second. I'm being.
You got to move.
Oh, okay, never mind. They went to another room, I think.
You good? All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
I picked this room because it was like, they're not going to be using this room today. There's
yeah,
no way. And then all of a sudden, it's like emergency case, bang. They got to come in
yeah.
here. Anyway, carry on. So
But yeah,
yeah. So first year, Coach Proctor. Yep. Carry on.
yeah. So I was, initially like, what are we doing? Like, are you serious? I gotta come in on a Sunday. Like, this is supposed to be a day I got off, and we gotta do yoga. But as soon as we finished and we did like the cool down breathing, I fell asleep. And I was like, what? I was not even tired. Like, this doesn't make any sense. So and then I transferred schools, and that was something that I kept all pretty much throughout until I graduated. Was I would do yoga in the summer times in my back deck. We had like this whole little gazebo spa thing set up in our backyard at my parents' house. So I would do yoga there, and also was doing pretty much like bodybuilding and football workouts during that time. So it was always kind of a little bit of a mix. And then once I got to UConn and decided to walk on, and you're just doing what you have to do to make the team. So you would train hard all the time. You're like, I don't expect to feel good. I just got to be able to do what I have to do. So that was kind of the mindset while playing football, was just, constantly grinding. And I wouldn't say that I ever felt good during that time. So once I graduated and I started in this field, and I'm working with like initially I was working with people in their like 60s and 70s right away, who were coming off of just out of what's the word I'm looking for, PT, just out of PT, and they just wanted to feel good. And I'm like, what? Like, you're doing this just to feel good? You don't want to get a six pack, or you don't want to, you know what I mean? So it was like, it was this whole new world of just thought that I was exposed to. And then I got lucky that I came across, at that time, it was, I I forget what the woman's name was, but she was part of Strong First, and she's who introduced me to like properly doing kettlebell swings. And I thought I could, perform athletically, broad jumps, this and that. I thought I was good. And then she had us do like our first set of swings and then tested our broad jumps after that. And I jumped like, I don't know, a whole foot further. It was insane. So, and then, a lot of the premise behind Strong First is not necessarily to make yourself feel bad. It's pretty much like minimalist training. So it's like, okay, what's the least amount that's going to give you the most effect? And then how to strategically do that so that you're not having such a huge biological cost, so that pretty much you can continue to do that work over and over again without ever having to rebuild yourself because you're not breaking yourself down.
Yeah.
So that's how pretty much I got into my current training philosophy of just trying to, you can still have performance be a goal and you can still achieve it through routes that aren't going to make you feel awful day to day.
All right. So let me ask you one last question here before we wrap up. And we talked about mindful movement. We talked about being present in the moment when you're lifting something, to know why, how, and trying to do quality reps. Okay. One of the things that I often say to patients, so because we kind of promote the same things, right? We're not affiliated with Strong First, but we one of our coaches is Strong First certified, and so we kind of have the same philosophy. But one of the things that we also do is we do train awkward positions. We intentionally train awkward positions. Yeah. So and we have a reason for that. Even though we do preach quality reps, right? We do think it's important for people to see those positions sometimes, so that their body has some kinesthetic awareness when those situations come up. Yeah. But number one, so the first part of the question is, how do you feel about awkward positions? And part two of the question is, when do you use them, if ever?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's great. Basically, I think that would fall under the idea of like purposeful movement, right? So it's not that any position's bad. It's if it's uncontrolled, right? Like if you're doing a squat and your knees are dumping in, but you don't mean for that to be happening, that's a bad position. But if you're purposely internally rotating your leg and loading that position, not a bad thing, right? So it's definitely one of those things that when done well is going to give you many, many benefits. But it's like most things, you have to know what the rules are before you can break them. And you have to be able to follow the rules well, and then you can go ahead and break them. So I think the places where I end up putting them in are sometimes in mobility. It's going to be something that's unloaded and just getting the body used to being in those, I guess, bad positions, right? So like doing some rocking motions on the floor, or where having the ankles and knees and hips do some traditionally weird things. But then like once people have much better movement competency in like the basics, so like just doing a regular hinge or doing a squat or doing overhead press or arm bar or whatever, and then at that point it's like, okay, they've shown that they can efficiently do all these things. Now we can start to play with these in between positions, and then so that can be stuff like, I mean, there's a whole armbar series that the guy Pablo Maychek goes over, where you're doing internal, external rotations with your shoulders, even shrugging your shoulders. But it's like you have to have pretty good body awareness and strength before we're going to get to that point of being able to play in those positions, because strength is needed. But
all right, so we got 20 seconds left. Right. Tell people where to find yourself, and stay on the line on Zoom afterwards. Go ahead.
All right. You can find me at Power of Strength. So this is going to be the best place to pretty much, if you want to contact me or just watch watch how I train myself. I usually keep what I do with the clients a little private, but